Mr. President, thank you for joining us on NTV.
Thanks for
the invitation. And welcome to Kenya.
Thank you, thank you.
President Stubb, this is your first visit to Africa since you took office. Why was Kenya chosen as your first destination?
Well, I'd never been to Kenya before, and I'm a firm believer that the world order is changing. So we're living sort of a post-World War I, post-World War II, or post-Cold War moment. It'll take about 5 to 10 years for the world to settle. And there are going to be a few key countries or swing states that are going to decide the way in which we're going to tilt. And Kenya, for me, is one of them. And that's why I wanted to come to Kenya.
What concrete areas of cooperation are you looking to strengthen between Kenya and Finland during this visit?
Well, a few things. First of all, I come here with a big business delegation. So there's going to be the normal sort of trading part of things, which can be about education, it can be about technology, it can be about forestry or other industrial forms. Second, I think President Rukia and I look at the world when it comes to peace mediation in a very similar way. So I wanted to learn more about the regional conflicts that we see here, for instance, Sudan or DRC Congo. And then in exchange, of course, I wanted to give my 2 cents on Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine. So what can we do on that front? And then one sort of more specific one is education. So we've been working on that together. So many different fields of cooperation that we can do together. Kenya has 56 million people. We have 5.6 million.
You speak of education, President Stubb. In 2021, a scholarship program launched by Uasin Gishu County, which is one of the counties in Kenya, aimed to send Kenyan students to Finland to study. However, it ended in a scandal. Hundreds of students were left stranded, while the families were left financially distressed. A Kenyan government task force later reported that Finnish universities and embassies contributed to the fallout, that is by deviating from the initial agreement, by demanding full fees upfront and threatening students with deportation. How does the Finnish government respond to these claims?
Well, I was completely out of office at the time, of course. But the bottom line is that I think, first of all, we need to have more educational exchange. So what happened, from what I understand, was very unfortunate. And I think mistakes were made all around. But I hope that this will be settled in the courts. I hope that the processes are ongoing. I hope that the investigations will lead to solutions. I think in some cases, the Finnish universities were also quite happy in hosting, actually, the students.
Trade between Finland and Kenya has seen fluctuations. What strategies can be implemented to boost bilateral trade and investment, particularly in sectors like technology and renewable energy?
Well, I'm always careful to give advice from the government side on what business can actually do. But I think the starting point is to understand that we're now moving from a world where we used to have trade rules, clear ones, multilateral rules, say through the WTO, to a more transactional world. And the EU is for us the one that trades for us. So the EU has exclusive competence on trade, on competition, and on customs. So the framework is there. So for instance, today, the Trade Commissioner of Europe was here looking at what kind of cooperation we can do. And then the rest falls into place. You know, can we help in the green transition? What can we learn about each other when it comes to technology? What kind of means can we do together? And again, I think it starts quite often with people-to-people contact, and that's what these kinds of visits are all about.
We can all agree that climate change is a shared global concern. How can Finland and Kenya collaborate more effectively on climate resilience and green innovation?
Yeah, no, I agree. And one of the problems is that the world seems to be able to cope only with 1 or 2 crises at a time. So right now we're seeing an increase in conflicts, which means that we talk less and less about climate. I mean, I don't have a magic bullet of how it should all be done, but in my mind, it needs a sequence of 3. First, you need legislation, in other words, rules which set the frame for what you can do in order to help the climate. Second, you need finance, so you need financial instruments and public and private banks that finance it. And thirdly, you need innovation. So my point is, you can't legislate or pay yourself out of this crisis. You have to innovate. So if there's something that we can learn from each other on the innovation side, you know, between a country which has a fairly cold climate versus a country that can have a multitude of renewables used. So I'm sure that there are a lot of synergies there.
Just like you've spoken on this climate finance, and that's a lot of developing countries, that is an issue that they're struggling with. What innovative financing mechanism do you think Finland could support, accelerate Kenya's climate adaptation projects, particularly in vulnerable, arid and semi-arid regions?
Well, I think there is the bilateral bit. So there you have to go into the companies. You know, some of them startups, some of them small and medium-sized companies that deal with climate. So I'll give an example. Finland, for instance, in terms of electricity, it's 95% CO-free. So it's clean. So a lot of innovations that come from that. When it comes to finance, I would actually knock on the door of the European Investment Bank in Luxembourg, which is the biggest public bank in the world. It's bigger than the World Bank or bigger than the EBRD, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And that bank is now 50% only about climate. So when you look at, for instance, financing climate solutions for arid areas, which you asked about, I think the EIB is a good place to have a look at.
What are the key achievements and ongoing activities related to Finland's support for women's participation in politics and the prevention of gender-based violence in Kenya?
Well, I can only give an answer on the first one, not so much the second. Now, Finland is a country which gave the women right to vote, as we have a fight with the New Zealanders who was first. But let's say, to keep the New Zealanders happy, that Finland was the second. Now we live in a society which is as equal as it has been throughout its history. If you look at just political participation, I think 47% in our parliament are women. Half of our government is women. I remember when I was foreign minister, we ended up being, for the first time, more female ambassadors than men. I ran a government where there were more women than men. These are only elements. But then we come to something like, domestic violence, for instance. Still a lot of work to be done, not only, in Kenya, but also in countries like Finland. So equality is a road. It's a process which you have to work at all times.
Finland has been ranked as the happiest country in the world for 7 years in a row now.
Yeah.
That is according to the World Happiness Report. President Stubb, the world wants to know, what's the secret?
I don't have an exact answer for it, but a few elements probably. First, we have a very close relationship with nature. So 75% of our country is forests. We love our lake districts. We love the fjälls up in Lapland, and I personally have a close attachment to our archipelago. It's rough and rugged, but it's absolutely lovely. Second, I think education. I think it all starts with the sense that you learn something new every day. You're curious. You go into places where you actually feel a little bit uncomfortable, but you get this sort of aha experience. And that, I think, is a key of happiness. And then probably the third one is equality. I do think that you need to have a society where you have equal opportunity. Now, having said all of those, if you ask my countrymen, not everyone will say the same thing. They'll have different reasons for happiness. But my personal sort of take on it is that we all strive towards happiness, but happiness comes from personal meaning in life. And usually meaning comes from not acquiring stuff for yourself, but actually helping someone else and making a difference. And I hope that a lot of my countrymen and women feel that they make a difference to someone else's life, and then they tick the box in the happiness report, and we end up being the happiest country in the world 7 years running.
I think you touched on an answer that I was going to ask. That is, Finland, most people might not know, but they pay high taxes. But most countries relate high taxes to being sad and well. Is there a correlation between people in your country paying high taxes but yet are very happy and content?
I mean, I think taxes, of course, are a financial means of trying to find equality in a society. So you probably have some people who feel that we pay too much taxes and they're unhappy about it. Then you have others who say that we pay too little taxes, but they're actually quite happy about the tax level. And it's always about finding the right balance. Again, no one, not even Finns, live in a utopia where the system is always perfect. We have to remember that liberal democracy is a process, not an end state.